Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Malonis, and I am the chair of the 2020 Young Professionals Network. Today, we have some really great YPN committee members joining us on a panel to talk all about starting your real estate career. We are joined by Brian Santos, Kelsey Belluz, Rose Hack, and Justin Bock. If I can get you guys to turn on your cameras, unmute yourselves, and we'll start with Brian, if you can introduce who you are and where you work.
Cool. My name's Brian Santos. Thanks, James. And I'm out of Kitchener-Waterloo, about an hour or so, depending on traffic, southwest of Toronto.
And Brian, how long have you been in the business?
So I got my license in 2008. So I guess I'm now going into almost 13 years now. So time really flies. Can't believe it. Yeah. It feels weird to say.
Yeah. I'm going to just go in order of my screen that I see here. Rose, how long have you been in the business and where are you from?
I'm from Ottawa, and I've been in the business as a licensed real estate professional for about 2 years, but I was side hustling as an unlicensed assistant for a year before that as well.
Oh, awesome. So you've got some really interesting insight into the industry from the backside of the admin team.
Definitely some interesting insight for sure.
Justin, how long have you been in the business and where are you from?
I am from the Blue Mountain, Collingwood area, and I've been selling now for about 7.5 years.
Awesome. And Kelsey?
So I sell out of Thunder Bay, Ontario, obviously, and I've been doing it since 2009. But previous to that, I was actually working as an administrator in the office. So it's probably been about 15 years now.
That's awesome. So we've got a nice range of experience in the industry, both on the licensed and unlicensed side, which is kind of cool to see how this is going to play out. So we do have some questions. For those that are watching, you can use the chat function to drop any questions and we'll answer them near the end of the webinar. And so let's get right into it. This is a question everybody always asks. How did you pick your brokerage? What was your experience interviewing? And was your first interview the brokerage that you chose? So I'm going to open that up to whoever wants to answer, and let's just get the conversation rolling.
Well, I don't know if you guys remember, because you guys have been in the business for so long, but since I just started recently, as I mentioned, I was an unlicensed assistant before. So the goal was to fold me into that person's business. So I did interview a few other brokerages, but I went with that brokerage first. But I know I've only been in the business for 2 years, but I have switched brokerages. I'm on my third now. So if anybody out there is looking at starting and they're worried about making the wrong choice, like, you can always change.
Yeah, so what made you switch without getting too political?
So I think that it's really hard as a new agent to kind of know what to look for in a mentor. And I know we're going to get into that topic later. Mm-hmm. So I think the first brokerage I started at didn't have a great mentoring program for me. And I find that I was getting a good start to my business. And then I switched to be on a big team, which was about, at the end, almost 6 agents. And that team just felt too big for me. And then I connected with somebody who was working in an area of town I wanted to work in, who was focusing on the kind of sales I wanted to sell. And so I just kind of joined with her. So now I have a buyer agent, listing agent relationship, and it's really helped my business grow.
That's awesome. I've been seeing your Instagram lately. You've been killing it. So it's really nice to see the trajectory. So Brian, I'm going to go to you next because you're one of our more seasoned realtors here. So I know you are, if you guys haven't seen any of the previous webinars, Brian and Kelsey are both legacy real estate agents who come from a family of realtors. So Brian, did you interview your current broker or the brokerage that you first started with because of your family, or did you?
Yeah, so I was a bit, I didn't really have an interview process that way. I kind of just jumped in the same brokerage where my parents were already working. I got my license. I started that process while I was still in university. I was in 3rd year. So I just kind of first got it just to kind of like help out with them. I never thought I'd be selling real estate full time. It was kind of just jumping in that way. So yeah, that process was pretty quick and easy. It's just if I want to work with them, I'd be at the same brokerage though. So that's how that happened.
Okay, awesome. Justin, I know we were chatting about this earlier. You had some interesting experience when you first started, and you really get much support. But what was it like when you were interviewing your brokerage?
For me, I feel like when I first got into real estate, which is, kind of one of the reasons I was sort of happy to jump on this panel, to be honest, was because I feel like I didn't have any sort of guidance, even in any of the process. One person recommended me that I go and interview at that particular brokerage. I did. She said, all right, on the spot, okay, we're happy to have you. I, of course, didn't really know much about the whole process, that you're actually the one sort of interviewing them. And I was just very happy to have them want me on board. So I just sort of went there and jumped on. And I sort of feel like I had my eyes closed in the real estate industry for probably the first like 2 years, as I didn't really have much of that mentorship or that guidance at my brokerage. And it was a very old school brokerage. I mean, very, very predominant brand, but a very old school brokerage for the brand. And so I feel like I sort of had sort of a disadvantage my first 2 years in real estate, because I feel like I just didn't have that sort of mentorship or guidance to, hey, here's how you get into the business, and here's how you start off, and here's the things that you should do, or more importantly, shouldn't do in your first 2 years of real estate. So I really didn't start taking like the interviewing process and really thinking about my brokerage too much until like probably year 3 of my business.
Yeah, see, I'm the complete opposite. I didn't really pay attention to interviewing until year 6. So I stayed in my first brokerage for 5.5 years and decided to interview near the end, starting like into my 6th year. And that's when I realized that I hold all the cards. Like, the brokers want you. Use them, right? There's so much you can learn from the broker. Talk about mentorship, talk about, I think we get so caught up on splits, right? Who's got the best split? A split really means nothing if you're not getting anything out of it. I would much rather have a horrible split and have someone to mentor me and hold my hand, not really hold my hand, but, give the right guidance. And I think that's where we get so caught up when we're new to the business or just starting out, that we're so focused on, what our income is. Well, you can't really have an income if you're not being mentored properly. Yep. Which is a good segue into our next question. Kelsey, how did you structure your lead generation your first year?
Well, I basically didn't have a lead generating system. So other than leads that came in from our office, we're in a really central location. So we had a lot of walk-in clients, actually. With Thunder Bay being so small, there's only 3 or 4 key brokerages in town that monopolize most of our industry. So we get a lot of walk-ins based on our location, and it was just all in how you capitalized on them. So I actually, and I know times have changed a bit now, but I did 2 open houses a weekend. I basically went to every event I possibly could to just tell people who I was, what I was doing, and begged for business. I was a 19-year-old person trying to enter a world where I didn't know anything. So I was trying, you almost had to fake it to make it. And then once you got to that point where you knew what it took, you did the steps to take it. And, when you get to that point where you buy that house, you can explain your experiences, and then it just kind of takes you to the next level sort of thing. But yeah, my lead generating system is very old school. For the first while, I was honestly remembering it like a Rolodex in the back of my mind. It was crazy. I mean, not like that anymore, but.
Yeah, something I want to talk on later when we get into the database and CRM, because you're onto something there with the mind. Rose, as a newer realtor, how did you structure your lead generating your first, the only 2 years in the business? Like, how did you structure your lead generating the first year to now?
So the first few months I was in the business, I really didn't have a lead gen system at all. I didn't really, I was using word of mouth, promoting that I was in real estate, kind of like that, but I really struggled the first while until I joined a team. And then on that team, we did a lot of internet leads, so Google ads, Facebook ads, and stuff like that. So I really came up through the cold calling system of real estate, which some people, it works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. But one thing it really did for me was teach me how to be confident on the phone. As millennials, we don't like to pick up our phone. We don't like to use the phone, but it's a really big part of the business. So, before you knock it as a new agent, try it, because you never know what might be how you get the most business. And then since then, like I said, I joined another team where I'm kind of like a buyer's agent. So I get a lot of offshoot off of listings, which is a lot of follow-ups and, working that CRM.
Yeah, cold calling and door knocking is it's a really good way to get business, but I want people watching to understand that just because you pick up the phone once or you knock on someone's door once does not mean you're going to get that business tomorrow. You got to nurture that lead. You got to sit on it, work it, you know, put them in your database, put them on the drip campaign, pop by whenever you're in the area. Eventually that phone call, that knock will turn into business. It might be your 2, it might be your 5, nurture that lead. We did briefly mention online Google ads, and I know, Justin, you do a lot of Facebook ads for your listing of your business. Can you talk a little bit about that? How long did it take you to get comfortable with it? And, you know, was something you started at the beginning or recently implemented?
Definitely something I've really only implemented the last 2 years of my business. Really, when I started getting into the video content for my business is when I started doing the Facebook ads. Again, I really didn't have too much guidance on that sort of in my first sort of years in real estate. So it wasn't really until I started having sort of that digital content, my case, justified spending the money on Facebook leads. But that, I feel like one of the beauties of Facebook leads that I like versus online, and I probably won't ever spend too much money or time doing online leads personally. But one of the things that I do like about it is that I find that it's much more, it's a lot easier to have those organic conversations with people, because they're reaching, like when you've done a video, whether that be for your listing or for the for your neighborhood, if you're, you know, if you're farming a particular neighborhood or your community, they're reaching out to because they are connecting with you, because they like the personality you have in your videos. So it's much easier to have a sort of organic conversation. Like that's, you know, me, I'm not going to be the one to do cold calls. So good on you, Rose, for doing that, because that is definitely not something that's in my wheelhouse or something that I enjoy doing at all. But having a conversation with a Facebook lead is very, very different, easy, because they're reaching out. They're reaching out to you something specific because you've seen the exact video that they're watching, and you can have a very easy organic conversation. And that's personally like how I run my business entirely. So I know, so do you, James, very, very similarly, having those sort of organic conversations with the leads that sort of come in a natural way.
Yeah, and it's a nice way to nurture. And at the end of the day, no matter where your lead comes from, if it's, you know, a Rolodex in your head or a cold call or a Facebook lead, it's all about nurturing that conversation, right? It's like when you're dating someone. Before you get to marriage, you got to date them for a little bit. You got to warm up. You got to have a couple dinners, right? That's really how you nurture any kind of lead in this business. So coming off of the announcements over the last couple of weeks about personal real estate corporations, one thing I want to say probably none of us were good at when we first started in this business were finances and taxes. So Brian, I'm going to lob this your way. How did you structure finances and taxes year 1 to years 1 to year 3 in the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was probably the toughest thing when I first started, though, too, was just income. It goes really high and then really low. I was used to before having like a regular paycheck, and that's a lot more consistent that way. So it's quite the challenge, though, when you get like these, you know, big checks and then nothing for a long time, and the expenses sometimes are pretty consistent if you're working on your own. So it's just kind of getting used to that way of life. Like now I realize I don't get too high or low emotionally as, you know, money's going up and down, and just try to keep things as consistent as possible. And it's important to plan ahead, though, because when you do get like that check, make sure you tuck some side for HST and after for income tax. I remember the first time I filed taxes, I wasn't doing, now I do quarterly remittance. So kind of like lessens the pain. But at the very beginning when I did my first year, I cried. I wasn't anticipating having like that big hit that way. And you just got to plan for that, because that's one thing that I completely didn't realize, though, too. And it made it challenging. Even when you're trying to get a car or then a mortgage, and your income's going like this, it's challenging working in a commission-only based industry.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've all, most of us seen that skit on Schitt's Creek where they talk about the write-off people, and you can write things off for your business. That was me year 1 and year 2. I'm like, I can just write it off, right? I'm gonna grab a coffee, I can write it off. Who's writing it off, though? You know what I mean? Like that was the hard lesson for me, was not understanding the self-employed side of what real estate is, right? Because my parents were tied to the industry in a very different way, but they were also, you know, not real estate agents. And I came from a fashion background where my taxes were dealt with through my company. So I didn't really have that structure. Kelsey, coming from a family of realtors, did you have that in the back of your mind to set up your business that way?
Yeah, so we're really fortunate at my brokerage. They actually take taxes off for us for each paycheck if we want it. I took full advantage of it. I call it my little savings account. So come tax time, unlike all my other friends that are in the industry, I'm like, oh, I get a refund. And they're like, oh, I have to pay a lot of money. So I use it as a savings account. I don't blow it. My father was big on save it for a rainy day. You know, he always tells me you're only as good as your last sale. Like, make sure you bank it away because you never know when it's going to come. And he's been in it through the highs and the lows. And yeah, so I followed his footsteps and his advice in that. And I'm so grateful that I did. Lots of agents in our city, actually, they do find themselves getting into a little bit of turmoil with the taxes because they spend it. It is what it is. But our agents at our office do a really good job because it's like a savings for them and everybody kind of follows that and it works for them. So if I have any advice, use it as a savings account, basically.
Yeah, that HST is not free money.
Yeah.
Because that definitely creeps up on you when the tax man comes knocking for the coin.
Yeah.
I take advantage of...
No, go ahead, Justin.
Yes, I take advantage of the HST holdback at the brokerage level too. And I think, like, I would imagine most brokerages do that. So that would be a definite big tip. At the very minimum, have them hold your HST back to another account.
Yeah, and even if your broker doesn't, most banks will allow you to have a supplemental account on your online banking. No card attached, so you can't really spend it. But every commission check that comes in, just take that HST portion and shove it to the side. That way, when it's tax season, you can pay right out of that account. In case anyone's asking questions about personal real estate corporations, we will have a actual YPN Master Series on Prex, hopefully with the government relations team, governance team, and Tim Hudak. So stay tuned for a date on that. But I want to move along here and talk about training, because this is something that, to this day, I think you always learn. Everything is learning. That's why we're all here today. We learn from each other. It's like a giant mastermind. But when you first started, what kind of training did you enroll yourself in? Was it brokerage led or was it external? So I know, Justin, you're a big fan of training. So I'm going to start with you.
Yeah. So as old school as it is, my first sort of like training program that I did was Brian Buffini. And while I don't necessarily subscribe to all of his methodology in terms of, you know, the monthly or the weekly Popeyes or however, I don't think anybody wants to see me once a month or once every 2 weeks or whatever it is, but there is definitely a lot of value in that consistency and the follow-up. Like, that totally goes back to the whole lead generation aspect of it, that there's definitely a ton of value in that organic touch points with your clients if that's going to be how you run your business. So as much as it's a little much sometimes with the Buffini, but there's definitely some amazing takeaways there for sure. So that was my very first, like, 2 months in the business. That's what I started off. So
like 2 months in, you just sign up right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that one was actually a paid for, like, our brokerage supplemented like the overall cost of it. But that was still something that was out of pocket. But
okay. Rose, same question.
So I started out doing brokerage trainings, and all of the trainings that are offered by like OREA, like the free webinars, like going in and learning about, you know, matrix, like all of those things. And then I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of brokerages experiences, because like I've been through 3, and the first 2 were pre-pandemic. So they were pretty heavy on the brokerage wide training. So I went to all of those, all of the talking to agents. Like, honestly, if you have an office, if your brokerage has an office, and we're open in pandemic, obviously, like, go in, because you just kind of absorb everything from talking about real estate to hearing about different things to hearing about different deals. I mean, it's a, you know, old adage for us that every deal is different. There's nothing that's the same. So by like listening and hearing other people talk about things that are going on, you end up inherently picking up things. So, and then also like podcasts and, you know, doing lots of reading. There's like a ton of books out there for good reference. So I do a lot of training that way as well.
Yeah, this is going to segue nicely into our next question. But you're right, Rose. Pre-pandemic, getting in the, even post-pandemic, once things open up and you can get into your offices, you don't need a private office. Sit in the bullpen. Sit in any available workstation and just listen. Even if you just go in for an hour a day, don't even touch them. Just sit there and listen. You can hear conversations of other realtors and how they interact. You can, you know, pick up on deals going on here and there. It's a nice way to learn without having to pay for it, and to learn without having to actually shadow someone. right? It's kind of like the silent learning. But going into the next question here is, did you sign up with a mentor or a senior or seasoned agent? So Brian, I know your parents are realtors and both you and Joy are realtors. So obviously when you started, you joined your parents. Did you have any other mentorship in the brokerage besides mom and dad?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a pretty big brokerage that I work at, and there's a lot of seasoned realtors that had lots of business. I think that's the toughest thing in real estate is the lead generation. So you hang around those agents that are pretty busy, you know, you'll find work that way and opportunities. And the way I always thought about it was, you know, a piece of the pie is better than no pie at all. And if you're able to help them out, there's a wonderful opportunity to be had there. I know even in the beginning of the year, I was able to help a bunch of agents out that weren't online with their business. And I was able just to sit in my office and help guide them through with listings, with video, with photography, with virtual staging, because they weren't there yet. And we were able to work together that way. And I didn't have to leave my house because I wasn't able to, given the situation I was with my family when I couldn't leave because of our daughter. And it worked out that way. So there's lots of opportunity. So just like you say, just hang out with agents, give them a call. It's like, hey, I'm at the same office. Like I noticed you've got a listing here. Can I help? Right? People are always looking for opportunity. So just be hungry for that and you know, look for it. I know the other way that I kind of found opportunities at the very beginning was through leases. A lot of agents don't want to do them. I was happy to do leases, and it finally just had a big one pay off recently. I met someone, 8 years ago with a lease. He ended up buying a property, and now he just bought another one for 1.9 million, which is huge in my market because our average price $750. So I went from no one wanting that lead to him being a lease to now like almost a $2 million property. So just find those opportunities and find whatever works for you. And it's the best part about this business. You can succeed many ways, whether it be open houses or cold calling. Just whatever works for you, and just find it and then double down on it. So whether it be like you're good at open houses, don't do one, do two, right?
Yeah. So Kelsey, kind of the same question, but a bit of a spin on it. So during the time that we're now with COVID, we can't really be around people outside of our bubble. How would you suggest somebody signing up with a mentor or collaborating with a senior agent?
Okay, so I think obviously, not being able to be with somebody and be hands-on is really tricky. So I think it's important that you have constant communication with them and just pick their brain. Don't be afraid to ask. So that's one thing I'm big at with my brokerage is our agents are always welcome to pick up the phone and call me and ask any question. There's no questions off limits. Right when people start with us, it's like, okay, you just got your license yesterday, hop in the car, you're coming with me to see a day in the life of me. Because that's how I started. I hopped in the car with my grandfather and my father, and I followed a day in the life with them. And that's how I built my business, and it's become successful. You know, you go back to the basics. And I mean, I know with COVID, it's a little different, but just keep in constant communication, because when you're bouncing ideas off of people, something that one person might say, you might spin off to a completely different idea, and it might work for everybody. And I feel like just that constant communication with people, whether I'm learning things from agents at our office that have been licensed for 2 months, who got licensed in the pandemic, and they have a different outlook. And it just, you take it at different stakes. So whether they're veterans or they're new, everybody always has something to gain and learn from somebody else in the business.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice that even Brian made the point too about earlier in the year helping agents get into that that virtual mindset with virtual staging or video, whatever. It's I'm in a brokerage that the average age is 55 plus. So there's not a lot of agents in my brokerage who are running social media actively the way I am, and it's giving me an opportunity to work with them and promote some of their listings on the back end that they normally wouldn't do, and give them that that guidance on social training. So it's kind of nice to give it back in a way after you've been in it for so long, right? So they kind of guided you when you first started, now you help them as they're, I wouldn't say in their retirement years, but as they're slowing down. It's a really interesting transition. But I do want to talk about systems and processes. And I know this is actually how I met Justin years ago, was he came to one of my sessions when I was talking about branding and the systems I use in my brand. So Justin, what systems and processes do you use in your business? I know you're very systematic with your staging and your day-to-day operations with your paperwork.
Yeah, so, you know, about 3 or 4 years ago, I sort of, I can't remember which session I was in or something like that, but someone had recommended to really like dial in on my listing process. So that's what like I have like a 6-page listing process that absolutely not a thing gets missed, start to finish. And every time that I'm going through a new listing, if I think I need to add something to that list, it gets added to that list. But I think that was like, you know, part of our job, you know, in customers, like in a customer service role, like real estate agents, is to sort of delivering that same experience again and again and again, and improving that experience again and again and again. And I think that like with a process in place, like, you know, starting off even your very first listing, document everything start to finish, everything that you do, every phone call that you make, every time that your client calls you and says, hey, what about X, Y, and Z? Guess what? Your next 100 clients are going to probably ask about X, Y, and Z as well. So it's very important to, you know, document all of those questions, because then you can be like one step ahead of the process. And instead of them coming to you and asking about that, you've now sent out like an automated email that says, oh, here, by the way, these are the steps that you have to follow now that we've sold your property, or anything like that. So like literally, when I sat down and made my buyer's guide at the beginning of COVID actually, and really documented the whole entire booklet for my buyers, all of that content literally came from a back and forth email correspondence with a new buyer that came to me at the beginning of February. And I literally just went through and copy and pasted all of our correspondence, threw it into a booklet, and obviously, you know, prettied it up. But basically, like, that's how I created my buyer's guide, was through an actual live conversation with one of my prospective buyers that has never done anything in real estate. Like, even they've done their leases in the past, like through a property management company. So
yeah, and it's nice taking that that dialogue and creating something, but you don't have to create anything from scratch. Most brokerages will have some form of basic run-of-the-mill template that'll get you started, and then
absolutely,
you take that and you modify it over time. I mean, I've probably modified both my listing presentation, my seller's guide, my buyer's guide 100 times I've been in the business, because something's always changed. You always want to be current, but your brokerage will have that bare bones minimum that you can take and run with. Rose, again, same question. Like, what systems do you use in your business? Since you are, you know, you're going to your second year, or in your second year now, like, what do you use and what do you find really works? Because you've got that relationship with the buyer, with a buyer agent, listing agent at your office. Like, what do you find that really works for you?
So it's a bit different, because a lot of times the leads that I get are, you know, wanting to go see a property. So for me, it's a lot of, you know, like Justin said, kind of remembering my process, because like as you go through a showing, you're kind of meeting someone for the first time. You don't really know that much about them, and your goal while you're there is to really, you know, get as much information as possible without seeming like you're trying to stalk them at the same time. So you kind of have to like figure out what questions come off the most natural. Obviously, in the perfect world, like when you get a referral or you get to meet someone for the first time, getting them in and having that buyer presentation, which, like you said, the brokerage generally has one. And then if you can build off of that from your experience and kind of having the answer to the questions that your first time buyer or even a seasoned buyer who hasn't bought in a while is going to ask, having those answers ready and knowing and anticipating that is really important. So if you're new and you don't have anyone to talk to your friends, because your friends are going to ask you all the questions and they're going to ask you questions you don't know the answer to, and it's your job to kind of fill in those blanks and learn and be prepared for the next person.
Yeah, it's really funny you said that. So when I first started, I would take some of my friends out. I knew they weren't looking to move, looking to either rent or buy, but I'm like, I need experience on the field, right? I want to learn how to open a lockbox, how to, you know, deal with concierge. I'm predominantly in a condo market. So I would take friends and I would do buyer appointments with friends of mine. I would give the listing agent heads up of what I was doing, and most of them were pretty cool with it, you know, as a younger agent, and, you know, gave their sellers feedback from a different perspective. But it taught me things I normally wouldn't have looked for, right? Because my friends would ask, you know, since we're here, like, where's the gym, right? So I knew moving forward, every condo I showed, I wanted to figure out where the gym and the pool was, right? So if it wasn't a building I was familiar with, I try to get into the building earlier before my clients would meet me there and know where the gym was, know where the pool was. all the little things that make you seem a little more pro when you're new versus being, you know what, let me ask the concierge, right? So if you come off across a little bit of authority, you could be in the business 30 days. No one's going to know. Now, this is my favorite thing to talk about. And I'm going to go back to Kelsey because we kind of share a mindset on this with the database in our head. So let's talk about the importance of the database. Kelsey,
Yeah.
yours.
Okay. So learn from my mistake and actually write things down, because after you have a child, you don't remember things like you used to. It was really bad. So I used to know everything. Like I could remember things from 10 years ago, and then I had a child and it was like, oh, who are you again? It was really bad. So learn from my mistake. And even though your brain is a magical thing, make sure you write everything down, because it's huge to have that database. One big thing that I do with my database is I'm guilty for not constantly communicating with everybody. But I do try and, interact with them on social media. I might not post or comment on anything. I might send them a message. Oh, see, you're doing well or whatnot. And right now, 95% of my business is actually repeat clients or referrals. I've been doing this for like almost 12 years now. And it's crazy that my business has actually evolved that much, where I was in the trenches a lot in the first 5 years, where I sacrificed a lot in life. But when you sacrifice, your database is like the biggest thing. You keep that database solid and you've got that core, and it's like a web. It goes from there. So you just make sure that you have that solid database and you nurture them, and you make them know that you care about them, and it's not just about the transaction. That's one big thing. I always said that the day I will quit doing real estate is the day I look at it as a job and not something that I enjoy doing every day. And that, I feel like that's one of the big keys to my success, is looking at it that way.
Yeah, there's some good points in there. Before I go over to Brian, I want to touch on something Justin said earlier about the Buffini complex. So Buffini is really big on handwritten notes. And if you've taken this course, when you first started, you're going to implement things moving forward. Something as simple as sending out 5 handwritten note cards a week or every other week, just to those people in your database that are like, you know what, I was driving by and I saw, a pink Honda and I thought of you, because I know you love the color pink. Something as simple as that. And it takes away that whole, I'm a realtor looking for your business. And it says, I care about you, because you're thinking about them. So Brian, your database must be huge. You've been in the business a long time. You've got, a good, structured, solid core between you and Joy. How important is your database? Like, how do you use it?
Your database is everything. And I wish I realized that earlier and became more efficient with it at an earlier stage, though. I kind of made it up as I went along at the very beginning. But I realize now my database is everything. Those are your clients. You got to nurture your database. You got to feed your database. It's like a baby. You got to take care of that and then watch it grow, right? And sometimes you got to take people out of your database if they're not getting anything or anywhere, where you can even like rank them though as well. Like I wish I was better with it. At the very beginning, I kind of just ran it on an Excel sheet. Now, the last few years, I finally, got a CRM, and I wish I did it sooner, because it makes things so much easier that way to keep track of things. And yeah, feed it, feed them information, keep in touch, do all those things, because it's the lifeline of your business is that database though. And I didn't really appreciate that nearly enough at the very beginning though. So yeah, keep track of it and hold on to it. And if you do work on a bigger team, or other people, they'll want your database, you keep on to that. You hold on to, they're your leads.
Yeah, it's this is, and I've really young in the business. I've been in the business 8 years now, and we're going to 8 years. And I look at my database like my retirement plan, right? Because somebody's going to want those contacts. Someone's going to want those Toronto socialites. Someone's going to want all, the doctors, the lawyers. People want that. They're willing to pay for it. And a lot of seasoned realtors out there, whether it's in Toronto or in, Thunder Bay or Kitchener or Ottawa, they've got a good book, and they're willing to sell it for a lot of money. So that database is key. And I know, and I'm only picking on Justin because I've known Justin for the longest amount of time here. Justin is really solid with his database, and he remembers the tiniest little things. Like, he'll tell you and I only know because he brings it up all the time, was, the color shirt you're wearing the first time he meets you. And he'll remember that, because maybe it's your favorite color. And it's tiny little details like that go a long way with someone. And it's like when you're a really easy way to impress your client. And I'm going to I'm going to end with this point here is remember their coffee order, right? You're meeting a client and you want to grab a coffee, remember their order. Like, forget yours, right? Grab yourself a coffee, whatever you want to drink, but remember their order to the exact amount of sugar they put in, and bring it. That it's just like, you know what? It's more comfortable. They can take off that that defense mechanism and feel more comfortable in the appointment with you, and it'll do your world of business. So I got one last question for you guys, and then we're going to open up to the floor. I see a lot of questions on the chat and the Q&A here. This is something that we've probably all struggled with and all stumbled on when we first started, was how did you learn the day-to-day basics of your business? Sign installation, lockbox, MLS, because remember those old, like the punch lockboxes, the little pointy things on them, the ones that hurt your fingers? It took me a while to figure out how to use that, and I'm not ashamed to say it. So Rose, you're the newest in the business on our panel here. How did you get comfortable with everything out there?
So a big thing was I did a ton of agent previews. So like you said, James, like you went around and took your friends. Like I went by myself to like a ton of buildings, a ton of homes. I did just a bunch of stuff on my own because that's the best way to learn, one, how to get into lockboxes, where lockboxes are at certain buildings. And then two, it's a good way to kind of get an idea of what you're actually doing and what you're supposed to do when you go. So when you go with someone, you're not like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. So I did a ton of agent previews for that, which was really helpful. But I also asked a ton of questions and I shadowed some agents. And even now, like I still do some shadowing. Like this weekend, I'm going to shadow like a new build in the Ottawa area with my listing agent to go kind of like learn how to show a bit better. I think that's something that the best advice I got as a new agent was, you're a sponge for the first 3 or 4 years of your career. Like be a sponge, absorb everything, take every opportunity you can. So like if someone's in your office, like, oh, I'm doing an open house, like ask them if you can swing by, ask them if you can help, like go take a look at how other people do things, because you won't copy their business 100%, but you'll take bits and pieces from everybody else and be able to create a system that works for you. So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah. Justin, your signs, do you install them yourself? Like, how did you learn to deal with that? Did you eventually end up hiring someone to do it? You're muted.
I've had, one of my biggest tips that I will give in regards to this is become best friends with your front desk staff. Bring them coffee, bring them donuts, bring them Christmas presents, because if you, and I'm being dead serious, because if you can have those people in your back pocket, learning how the ins and the outs of the business and how like the sort of the day-to-day stuff runs with paperwork you need to submit, who they recommend for sign installation, lock boxes, etc. Sometimes they'll even have an extra lock box, and because they like you, they'll lend it out to you. That is probably going to be the biggest tip that I can give in learning how the day-to-day business of real estate works is be extremely nice to your front desk staff, because they will either be your best friends or your worst enemies.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. Kelsey, Brian, anything to add on this?
Yeah, you can manage costs at the very beginning. I know when I first started, I didn't use like sign installation. I did it myself because I was really trying to keep costs down. I know every time it's $30. I'm like, all right, cool. I can go there and drop that off myself to sign. And even sometimes I still do it. I keep the sold stickers in my car. I'll go put it on and save on the $20. When you scale your business, you get busier, you can't afford that time, and you have an automated service that does it. But the devil is in the details. Like, doing little things over and over consistently is what you're going to see success. Not doing like, there's not one silver, bullet or magic pill you're going to take, make you an awesome realtor. You just got to keep working at it and find those little things and little advantages and little opportunities. And just keep doing them and doing them and doing them. And even video, like some people do them professionally. Other people just do it. Like your phones are so good right now. Shoot your own video if you have to. It's way cheaper. When you get bigger, maybe spend some more money. But at the very beginning, do things cheap.
Yeah, it's all about managing that dollar and the time.
Because everyone tries to take their money at the very beginning, though. And they're always like, oh, that's always my favorite one. It's like, oh, it's one deal and it pays off, though. But if you keep doing that over time, like, yeah, you can, a lot of people out there trying to take your money in terms of different services that you may or may not need at the very beginning. And just take some free trials and see what works for you. Yeah,
and that's honestly a really good segue into some of the questions we have here, because it's all about using using what works best for you. There's no magic pill to this business, right? You're not just going to wake up tomorrow and be a multi-millionaire real estate agent. It just doesn't exist. They'll try and sell it to you with every coaching platform, with every, and I'm going to use the States as an example because most of the real estate coaches from the States all say the same thing. Take our program, you'll sell $1 million tomorrow. Doesn't work. Let's be real. It doesn't work. It's all about time. Time in this business, blood, sweat, and tears. That's what it comes down to. There's been a couple questions through about CRM, and we talked about this in previous webinars about the CRM platforms. There is no best CRM. It's whatever works for you. It could be an Excel spreadsheet and a Google Calendar. It could be something as simple as what your brokerage provides. They all have free trials, like Brian said. Try them out. Use them. Use, ABC month 1 and XYZ month 2. See what you like better, and then end up paying for it. This is a question that I think is really good for all of us to answer because I think we've all been there. What can you do with the people who are afraid to work with new agents? Rose, I'm going to pick on you because you're the newest in the industry. When someone says to you, you're too new in this business, how do you deal with it?
I've dealt with it a few different ways. One of them is to be like, yeah, I'm brand new, which means I don't have a huge client roster, which means you're going to get all of my time. You want showings on Saturday? I'm free. You want showings on Sunday night? I'm free. I'm available for you for whatever you need. And then you also have to kind of like reassure them and say, I'm not doing this on my own. I have a brokerage behind me. If you're on a team, you have a team behind you. Kind of help them know like your money's in good hands because I have other people looking over the things I'm doing. But the benefit you get from me is that I'm free. I mean, that's less the case now. But when I first started, it was very much like I'm free all the time and I'm available for whatever you need. So it helps to pitch it that way because there are agents who are like, okay, yeah, you want to go see this place? Unfortunately, my Thursday is busy with this other client, and then I've got an open house or all these things, which is great. You want someone who's busy, but there is an advantage to having more time on your hands. So use that for sure.
Yeah. Kelsey, same question, because you were really young when you started in this business. How did you manage some of those objections?
I think what I was taught was you go in there with confidence. So don't be cocky, don't be, like that. Just be confident in what you know and what you're willing to provide. And another big thing that I used too was office stats when I started. So I didn't use my stats because really I didn't have stats. I used office stats in comparison to what our brokerage has to offer as compared to XYZ Realty and stuff like that. And you know what? People were very confident. When I went in there with confidence, people were confident in me. If I walked into a listing presentation with my thumbs like this and my head down, they weren't going to hire me, and they didn't. And it took me a couple times to learn that. And then finally I'm like, you know what? No, I have to practice my confidence. I'm confident that I know what I'm doing regardless of what my age is. And you know what? It was the biggest compliment when, in Thunder Bay, our market, our average price is around 260, 270. So back then, when I was listing a $500,000 house at 19 years old, like that was the biggest form of flattery. I walked in there like I had nothing to lose. And that's another thing too that people need to realize is whether the house is $100,000 or $2 million, you treat it exactly the same. You have a level of professionalism and you want that $100,000 house to feel the exact same thing as that $2 million house. There's no different. You provide the same amount of service. And that's key to this.
100%. And another way to manage feeling new or feeling green in an appointment is how you dress. When I first started, I was that guy in a suit and tie for every single appointment, and I felt so out of place half the time. If you guys follow me on social media, you know I'm not a suit and tie guy. And it took me a while to realize, like, I thought that's what the client wants. And I actually lost the listing over it. And the client said to me, "You're trying too hard. You're trying way too hard to impress us, and it comes across as fake." And that was like the green light in my head. That was like, time to change how you do this. This is actually a question specifically for Justin, came in for Justin. What kind of videos do you do without having a listing?
So one of the things that I also do in terms of video is community videos. I did back in June, I did a 30 and 30 video series. So I did a new video every day where I spotlighted a different business a park, restaurant, anything like that, like in my local community for 30 days, you know, a really great way to become that sort of mayor of your neighborhood and really show that you're connected in there. And it's a really great way to also get that, my face is now out there 30 times, showing 30 different places in the area. So that's definitely a really great strategy. And you could do that on day one of real estate. You don't have to have a listing. And then of course, you know, it does help build out your social media content strategy as well.
100%. And that 30 and 30 you did was really informative because it got some of us from the city or from other regions who don't really know much about the Blue Mountain region, you know, give us a lot of knowledge on it. So no matter what market you're in, there's a huge opportunity to showcase what you do, and without even having listings. You don't have to have a lot of listings to market yourself on social media. And that kind of ties in with this question here about a social media strategy. Would you use your personal profile where you have all your contacts, or create a new business page and add all your contacts from scratch? I'm going to open up to whoever wants to answer, because this is a really, really simple thing to switch, and I'll touch on if no one gets to it.
Well, I've got. Sorry, go ahead, Rose.
I was just gonna say I have both. I think that there's a lot of crossover in my following, but I know that some of my friends don't want to see a ton of like real estate stuff all the time, which my professional one isn't 100% real estate. There's other stuff in it like home design. There's TikToks and stuff like that on my professional one too, but my personal one is kind of more like personal with like my life and my fiance and all that stuff. And then my professional one is a bit more focused on my career and me.
Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, I'm the same. I got a personal one and then one for the business. And it kind of makes it easy that way, because you'll bore your friends if you just keep talking about all the same thing. You listing though. But at the same time, it's finding that balance where it's a little bit tricky though, because no one wants to be a secret agent. Like, you have to let your people know, you know, what you're doing, where you're going. So finding that balance is tricky. I found having two separate profiles made it easier to find that balance, where I can, you know, show a bit more of my personality on my own personal page, and then business one, kind of keep a bit more businessy, but then we still do family posts on our business page so people know who we are. I think that's the big difference now when I see clients in the last couple of years. By the time I already meet them, whether it be on Zoom or a phone call or in person, they already know who I am.
Yeah.
You know, what I like, what I don't like, you know, where we live even. So, but ultimately people want to work with people they know and they trust. So you got to find that sweet spot. I just kind of do like what I like.
Yeah.
What I find that balance though, but yeah, it's tricky.
There's no right answer to this. And I'm kind of the opposite of the previous two answers. I only have one account, and it's what you see is what you get. It's business, personal, it's my life in the city. That's all it is. But for those that have a personal, I'm going to use Instagram as an example because I'm predominantly Instagram based. If you have a personal Instagram account, it is very easy to switch it to a business profile. That gives you the analytics. It's the whole other webinar on its own, but it gives you the analytics. It gives you so much more than a typical regular personal Instagram page. But we'll talk about that at another time. I want to keep going with some of these questions because there are some good ones here. What are your thoughts on selecting a specific niche market when beginning your business? Example, only selling specific farming area. Do you agree with the strategy, or are we losing potential business? Floor is open.
I'll go.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah. I think it's very important actually to pick a niche market for a multitude of reasons. One, all of your marketing, like understanding the buyers and the sellers for that niche market allows you then to curate all of your content, all of your marketing towards that particular niche. So you can really speak to that. Obviously, don't go too specific. I mean, obviously, if you live in a rural area and you want to do farms, like obviously that's not too specific because that's what's in your area. But definitely the types of buyers, the types of sellers that you want to work with, niche down, and you know, all of your marketing then will be tailored towards that, and you'll find it much easier to sort of clarify your message to them, which definitely helps for sure in gaining and attracting new clients, like definitely in an organic manner. But it also really helps you also service those clients at the best level, because if you, like James said in Toronto, if James knows all of those condos really, really well, then James can then attract condo buyers really, really well. And he now knows everything they're looking for, what's important in those condos, you know, the status certificates, whether they're clean, whether they have issues, whether there's lawsuits, whether he knows that those seven buildings are not going to get mortgage insurance for them, like whatever it is, like the more clear that you can sort of be on your target market, the more information that you can possibly get for them and like be a great source. Like if I was going to buy a condo in the city, like James would be the person that I would hire, even if I was looking for my own condo in the city, because, you know, I would want to know all of those little nuances that I'm not going to know as someone who doesn't sell there. Or even if I sold detached homes in Toronto and I was going to go look into a condo, those are two very, very different markets in the exact same city.
Yeah, you're so right. We've got time for a few more questions. I want to just power through because there's some really good ones here and I wish we had more time. But Kelsey, how did you learn the appropriate conditions / clauses to include in every agreement? There's no real training for it, and I think it's very important for new and experienced agents.
I shadowed. I had to sit. I thought the best thing to do was actually, well, obviously agents have to be willing to do this, but most are. If they're willing to work with you and mentor you, they're willing to let you sit right behind them, not say a word, and watch what they do when they're writing an offer with their clients. I know now it's a little different with DocuSign, AuthentiSign, and all the electronic signatures, where you're not as much face-to-face, but I think being face-to-face is a very important thing as well. So I just watched and I learned, and I like Rose said earlier, you're a sponge and you just have to absorb. And I'm still to this day learning. In Thunder Bay, we don't have, it's pretty straightforward. And we, like our condos even are straightforward here, where we don't have a lot of unique clauses that are needed, but there is the odd thing that we do need to run by other people. Like, how do you word this? How do we protect our client in the best way? We deal with a lot of FSBOs here, and our clients will call us and they'll be like, okay, they put this wording in and we don't know what to do. And our office actually has a group chat that we run a bunch of ideas by people, and people will openly dialogue. And sometimes we make our best clauses by actually sitting there and wording them with 10 people in a chat. And it's just all in teamwork, basically.
Yeah, 100%. We got time for one more question, but there's a few that I want to address. And the reason why I'm skipping over them is because they can be a little anti-competitive. So there's a few questions out here. I'm not going to read what they are, but if you feel your question may come across as anti-competitive, ask your broker. Just as directors, we will not answer them publicly. So please ask your broker on anything regarding the word commission. Last question, Rose, I'm going to lob this back to you because you are predominantly a buyer's agent, but how do you market yourself in an area when you have no listings?
Well, that's tough. I mean, my listing agent focuses a lot of her business on downtown condos. Okay. So that's definitely a focus for me. But I also like to say, you know, I do sales all across town. Like I do sales in the country, I do cottages, I do everything. I'm wherever my clients need me to be. So one, I can definitely market myself as a condo person. I live in a condo downtown. I know a lot of buildings downtown, so I can talk a lot about them. But in terms of marketing, you just say, you know, like, I've been in these buildings, I've seen these, I've read the status, I've done sales here. Oh, I have a friend who lives in this building, and go and see as many as you can so that you're knowledgeable when you go into them. Like, go and check them out, go look at them. Like you said, go early, find out where the amenities are. And if you're in a bigger city like Toronto or even Ottawa, like there are so many buildings here. I have a spreadsheet in my phone that says like where each amenity is for every condo building I've ever been in, because I'm not going to remember a building I went into my first month on like in this career versus now. So it's helpful for me to be like, oh, this building, right, this one, and then I remember. So take notes, be detailed, and be able to talk confidently about every place that you show. That's the best way to market yourself.
Yeah, you nailed it. Well, Brian, Kelsey, Rose, and Justin, thank you guys so much for joining us today and taking time out of your day to sit on this incredible panel. For everyone watching, thank you for joining us, and we welcome you back on November 25th. It's hard to believe that the month is starting to fly by. November 25th, we are joined by Andrew Fogliato of Just Sell Homes to talk about all things Facebook marketing and online lead generation. So make sure you register for that, and have a great day, guys.
See you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.